Very well welcome to day 3 of second edition of Mastercard EMEA Sustainability Week 2023. My name is Andrea Pražáková, and I lead Mastercard Foundry, which stands for Innovation, ESG and Gaming for Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa. And I'm your host in the Sustainability Week, and I'm really delighted that you're joining us today. If you've been with us for the last 2 days, on Monday, we discussed circular economy and the power of Web3 with another tomorrow and soulmates. Yesterday, we unpacked how technology, became so powerful in driving sustainable choices for consumers with Duconomy and Dreams. And today, we will do a deep dive into how to help and integrate and communicate ESG strategy with stakeholders, customers, employees, and to really build it into the fabric of products and services. So there is a chat which is enabled. So please talk to us on the chat, put question into a Q&A. We will try to answer it throughout the session or in the end of the session. So in each episode, I'm trying to start with a little story. And I was thinking really hard, what would be the best way to start this one? And then it just hit me. I have these two incredible women with me today on the panel who are absolutely perfect example of how a chief sustainability officer or person who leads sustainability companies should look like. So I thought, with that in mind, I will just start with, 2 minutes to take you back in time. And I want to challenge you a little bit. Do you have an estimate? When do you think the first CSO was named? You can put it in the chat if you have any number on your mind. How long ago it was. But I will of course tell you. I will not keep you uninformed. As recently as 20 years ago, the title of Chief Sustainability Officer was given, and it was very corporate novelty, right? And the first one which was known was Linda Fisher, which was the CSO of DuPont, and she was appointed in 2004. So imagine, that's almost 20 years ago, right? But 20 years is a very short period of time if you think how old the corporate is. And since Linda's first appointment, the number of chief sustainability officers at corporation globally really skyrocketed. In the last PwC study, it was found that global companies around 2020 and 2021 appointed about as many CSOs as all the 8 years prior that. So imagine, how little it was and how it's obviously going. So increasingly CSOs are part of the C-suites and, and directly reporting into CEOs, and the same profile having owners of companies who are in sustainability. I want to share this little story about a lady by the name of Virginia Helias. If some of you might know her, she's, a super awesome woman and works for P&G for 35 years and is a chief sustainability officer. And why I like her so much is she set for herself a goal, which I feel should be almost a goal for everybody who works in sustainability as a job, right? She said that her goal is making her job obsolete. Somebody might like it, somebody not. But I really love the vision because she said is if she does her job well, sustainability will be a business way of life across operations, supply chain, marketing, and all the communities the company actually serves, right? So in her mind, it will be a constant presence in every employees, every stakeholders, every shareholders in day of interaction. And she called herself even a cheerleader and was helping people to motivate. So what I really liked about this way is how she managed, and she looked at her job from a different lens, right? She wanted to make a change in the organization, make the ESG goals really understandable, clear, and exciting for everybody. So the CSC role, spanned across from manufacturing to purchasing to encouraging new ideas. And I think this is exactly what my guests are doing today, right? They changing companies. They changing the DNA and bringing sustainability on forefront, not only in their own organizations, but in front of their customers and partners. So without further delay, let me introduce them. I'm really excited to have with me Rana Hajirasouli. Rana has 11 years experience working for litigation outsourcing company and marine conservation research unit, and recently the petrochemical industry. Rana has won several accolades and recognition for her work in applying biomimicry to sustainable practices. She holds LLMA and M.Phil from Trinity College Dublin. And also she's accredited in GRI, GHA, and SEH. I am Czech. For me, spelling is so horrible, but I hope I got it all right. She's currently also a master's candidate in sustainability leadership at the University of Cambridge and a founder of a really incredible company, The Surplus, which she will be talking about a little bit later. A B2B climate tech startup which helps companies become climate intelligent by thriving on and off surplus resources. So welcome, Rana. Really delighted to have you. My second incredible guest is Nadia Boumeziout. Oh my God, Nadia, I am not getting it right. Boumeziout. Nadia is a highly accomplished sustainable professional with distinguished career spanning across more than 2 decades. Throughout her career, Nadia became a champion of sustainability, strategic communication, and corporate governance. And she's, her expertise really lies in developing and implementing sustainable strategy to engage stakeholders and ensure transparency. She has a really unique perspective on the role of technology in measuring the true impact of sustainability initiative, and she's passionate about finding innovative ways to harness and power drive change. I think what really, caught me that, Nadia is also super deeply committed to promoting financial literacy and financial inclusion, as well as supporting diversity. She has personally supported and empowered the girls' education in Tanzania, demonstrated her dedication of making positive impact beyond what she's doing on day-to-day basis. And similarly to Rana, obviously, she's recognized through her certification in business sustainability from Cambridge Institute. I think that binds you both together. She's a co-chair of the Sustainability Action Society and the Capital Club in Dubai, a member of Dubai Sustainable Finance Working Group at DIFC, and an amazing mentor for Visor at Mastercard. So Nadia, great to have you. Ladies, jump straight into it. I was talking for too long. Rana, Surplus. Tell us, how did it start? Take us on a journey.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much for the very warm welcome. It's such an honor to be here with you. It's also worth saying it's very rare to see all female panels. So this is very exciting, especially in the sustainability space. So I actually would love to start off with a little bit of context that's relevant for everyone. And, it's the elephant in the room. It's fossil fuels, right? And fossil fuels, they provide us with this incredible calorifically dense energy that we've ever seen, meaning we have so much of it in such consistent supply that it's informed our entire industrial systems architecture. So everything that provides us with the comfort of our modern lives is connected to hydrocarbons. So on one hand, we hate it, but on the other hand, we love all of the luxuries that it gives us, right? So from our transport to our daily products and everything else in between. And a lot of the ramping up of this system, which was very interesting to me at the beginning of this journey, I found out happened during the 50s and 60s. And then during the 70s, we really stopped expanding that system and tried to maintain what we have through what we call now resource efficiency. Right. So many of our changes, most of the changes in our system arise out of necessity, which is a need rather than a want. So then I thought, well, what happened in the 1970s? Obviously, one of the reasons this system stopped expanding was as a result of the oil crisis that also simultaneously saw the emergence of more sustainable industrial architecture, which is what we know now as industrial symbiosis, where these systems allowed for the incredible exchange of excess materials from energy to water to materials and so on within co-located companies within a specific area. Basically, back then, we couldn't afford to waste. So we also saw, what we know now as the kind of circular economy systems that were also heavily implemented back then in the ex-Soviet bloc countries as a means to continue meeting the needs of the population and the economy with a minimal impact on the environment by reducing waste and reducing pollution. So back then, the world couldn't afford to waste anything. So now if we're taking a macro look, we understand that systems only change once there's a need to do so. And I loved your story because it really makes me think about the obsolescence of what we're going to look at in our future trajectory. So right now, for the trajectory we're going, scientists are unanimously concerned and agreeing that our ability to meet 1.5 degrees warming as per the Paris Agreement is very difficult. So businesses are scrambling to find ways to kind of navigate this, net zero landscape. Many of them are leaning into carbon offsetting, but in reality, we know it's just not enough. They don't have the resources to do what businesses, they don't have the resources to understand what business models work for them. So collectively, as businesses, an enormous job. And the job is basically to locate what sustainable business models suit our operations, because there is no one size fits all approach. So basically, in bearing all of this in mind, we take the case of, global inflation. Recently, actually, Grant Thornton published a very interesting report in 2022 that saw the UAE alone had an 18% increase in energy and utility bills, 17% increase in raw material costs, and 16% increase in equipment, bank interest, and taxes, and so on. So as a result, the surplus was kind of created as a response to this growing need for companies to survive external shocks, growing costs, but also hoping to give them the opportunity to engage in sustainability with what they have right now, and also turn a profit by providing services, right? By leasing the idle assets and selling their surplus resources for companies to have, uses for it. So fundamentally, what, our perspective is, we need to create local ecosystems that are more resilient, self-contained, while also creating maximum values that we didn't witness before.
It's really fascinating. I'm Czech, so I grew up during the system you described, right? So I was 16, then the revolution came. And I'm really fascinating that, you look at the model, which obviously we grew up with and we lived with, that this is and it's so true when you look at it from a perspective, not from a political power, right? And maybe oppression of different sources, but from an economical, we've been fully sustained, right? And honestly, yes, you go today from a micro example, you go today, you can have 25 different types of yogurts, right? We had 2 yogurts, one with marmalade, one without marmalade, and we are okay, right? I end up quite fine, right? 2 types of breads, right? 2 types of milk, and everybody was so. Of course, I mean, the audience might be, shooting at me that I shouldn't compare it, but I love the view which you just described, because it's so true that if you go onto a micro level within one society, you are actually, and you are more efficient, and look at it the way how surplus is looking at, you can be much more sustainable than we actually think we can be. So I love that, right? So if Nadia, you come from a very different angle, right? Than the surplus. Can you share with us, at Zurich as a CSO, what are some of your focus areas?
Yeah, I mean, from the outside, it seems like we're coming from a totally different angle, but in the end, I think we're all somehow connected, and all of our sectors are somehow connected when it comes to sustainability. I think nobody can do it alone, and there are cross sections and synergies. Right. So for us at Zurich, sustainability really cuts across all aspects of our business, and maybe it might seem a bit strange for what does an insurance company have to do with it, but for us it really cuts across many areas. The way that we have structured our sustainability approach is across 3 pillars, which is customers, planet, and people. For planet, our main focus is obviously our net zero goals, and we have 2 main goals. One is to be net zero within our own operations by 2030, and the second goal is to be net zero within our overall investment portfolio by 2050. These are ambitious goals. Right. Being net zero within your own operations by 2030 is quite ambitious, but we're confident that we're going to achieve it. The second aspect is around customers. So what do we do for customers? For customers, in many areas, it's about helping them transition to a net zero future. So really helping them along on their journey and providing products and services that can help them throughout that. And a big part of that is looking into resilience. So adaptation is a big topic that we're looking into. The third pillar, which is people, focuses primarily on our employees. It's about upskilling our employees to be ready for the future of work. That goes across sustainability, but also technologies and all other requirements that are there, and to create an inclusive workforce that is really gives everybody a sense of feeling included and a sense of belonging.
It's interesting, and we will go on the employees a little bit later, but I want to jump back to Rana, because Nadia just spoke about the vision of Zurich, right? When I went onto your website, Rana, I was reading, and I will just read the quote because I don't want to mess it up. So it says, the surplus is a platform which makes your invisible values visible. What does it mean? What does it mean for your, for the business owner or for the partners you partner with? Can you share an example to bring it alive?
Sure. So essentially what we really do is addressing the overall structural shortages that are existing within the industrial system and the need to kind of capture that value before it slips through the cracks. So, putting it into context, we just spoke about that hundreds of years ago. Everything needed to survive was within our local proximity. We grew our own food to survive. If not, we'd buy it from our neighbors. We sourced our metals relatively easily nearby. So we were much more adaptable, much more responsive, much more resilient than we are today for any external shocks from financial to climate. So since we've plugged oil and gas into the equation, it's been great for development at such a rapid pace, but it's built on the present just-in-time supply chain grid with such layers of complexity. It spans the way that we make things, from the way that it's being shipped from one end to the other at such a low cost with such complexity that we barely understand it. So it won't be cheap to run things like this forever. And the pandemic gave businesses, I feel, a real taste of what could potentially happen to disruptions and the prices of materials going forward. So once we're moving forward to renewables, this entire industrial architecture will change if we're slowly moving away from oil and gas. It has to, because we of hydrocarbons till now, right? So to give you an example of what that invisible value means, of course, we don't complicate things like this for our customers, but we had an SME fashion brand called Nomad. They're fantastic, and I only buy thrift except for them, actually. They're very cool. So, they had quite an overhead cost by meeting kind of a really large minimum order quantity as an SME, that really kind of broke the bank for them to kind of import sustainable textiles from abroad. So we matched them with kind of a local white label apparel manufacturer who technically works in their vertical, and they supplied them surplus stock. So that gave them access to materials in 2 days rather than 3 weeks, saved them about 44,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent from scope 3 emissions, and of course, saved them 94% of their sourcing costs. So with this type of localization, what we're trying to really work with is, rather than continuing on a trajectory of linearity that's on already pressured supply chains, we're trying to kind of really localize that and shorten that. Of course, at first, it's kind of an exercise of challenging organizational psychology on the idea of, I don't want to compromise our business model. But once we find that the business actually push past that, they see if anything, it helps enhance it.
I think that's really fascinating, and you touch on the business model and the mindset. So it's almost like a DNA, right? Nadia, one of the biggest challenges to implement successful strategy on a small scale or big scale, it's really to change the DNA, right? And we heard it also in the beginning. If you've in the past, it was a change of the management style and change of the product, change of pricing, but now it's really changed towards sustainability. From the journey you went through, right? What are some of the key components to be successful, to actually implement the change? Because one person, one Nadia can't, obviously, I am sure you can change the whole world, but you would need to have multiple digital twins across the company. So how do you change that dimension?
I think you gave a very good example earlier when you spoke about the lady that said, she wants her job to become obsolete as a chief sustainability officer. And I think that should be the goal. And I think probably most sustainability officers would see it that way. So I think the chief sustainability officer is the start that kind of brings in the ideas and the awareness and the knowledge and then spreads it across the organization. What we really need is leadership commitment to get it started right at the top. There needs to be an understanding. And I think it even starts right at the board level, where board directors have to be upskilled and understand the implications of sustainability, climate change, and related topics. And then integrated within the company's strategy and operations throughout supply chains and within decision-making processes. That has to also be done on a governance and broad level. It's also about encouraging a culture of employee engagement and empowerment. Employees have to be empowered to also, put in ideas, come forward with ideas within their area. The moment they understand how sustainability relates to their specific area within the business, they need to be encouraged to also come up with ideas and suggestions.
Right.
And to me, above everything else, collaboration and transparency is key. It's really important to be clear about the goals and the targets that have been set, translate them into what they mean within the business, and then really collaborate across the entire business and with external stakeholders as well.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying, because often, when you start to talk about net zero targets and many other things, it goes so above the heads of people, right? And they just say, it's not touching me. How does it have anything to do with what I'm doing on day-to-day basis? So the translation, it's so key, right? I mean, Yes. So Rana, I like your holistic approach on the, the raw material and the entire journey, right? And on Monday we had here the CEO of Another Tomorrow, which is a sustainable brand, and also Vanessa and Regil from Soulmates. And one of the interesting topics which came up is that throughout the journey, right? And Another Tomorrow is a great example that they obviously meet the farmers, and then they really, because they started with that principle in mind, they've been able to go through the whole production, until obviously resell and so on. But what came out is the end part, right? So some companies manage it, and with also your help, to source the right material, maybe locally, with a lower impact, decrease the cost. But the last leg of the circularity, to say, let's say I have this garment, right? So once it was resold 3 times, maybe it can't be used anymore. What happens to it? How can it still go back in form of something else? So I just want to understand, how do you help your customers to bridge these challenges? What do you do with that?
No, thank you so much, Andrea. It's really interesting because I had a kind of similar approach. In my previous job, I was working in a manufacturing company. And of course, manufacturing, you have to visit a lot of other manufacturers, whether it's upstream or downstream. All the site visits I conducted with my colleagues, I just saw the enormous amount of potential of the excess resources that are just kind of sitting there, and it's cooking up, and it's costing them enormous amounts of money. And they just think, well, oh, we're doing something with our waste. Waste management comes and picks it up. Unfortunately, 90% of the time it goes to landfill. There's hundreds of tons. Actually, just to put this into context, it's a $288 billion per annum problem, and that's just growing. So once you the real value proposition I was hoping to actually bring to our customers is really allow them to understand what they see as waste, because it's not just materials, it's also people's time, employees, right? It's their expertise. For example, a perfect surplusing idea would be using Andrea to consult SMEs, for example, as a revenue driver within Mastercard's kind of organization, or taking health and safety officer with an excellent knowledge of ISO or local health and safety laws. They could provide servitized streams, right? So so essentially what we're really doing is just giving them a methodology. It's not about us. It never really was. It was always about the businesses. So we just wanted to help them eradicate the term waste from their vocabulary, simply by collaborating with other companies, because they never actually know what their value is outside of their normal business until they have those conversations. So we hope, we actually created that methodology for it to be accessible and simple for them to create new ways of doing things. And also contributing to the circular economy while they can drive both internal value and external value as well.
I think that I want to use an analogy almost to describe it, right? So I think we grew up in a society where when you cook at home your dinner, you would take the roots and put them away, and you would take the peel of the onions and put them into the bin, right? And I started to recently take all of it and make soups out of it. And it tastes exactly, there's nothing wrong with it. Just optically, we think that it's old and we can't use it anymore. And I think we need to start to look at anything we have in our hands with that kind of lens, right? How can we not put the peel of the onion or peel of a garment or peel of a car just away because we feel it's not perfect, right? It's not in the perfect shape and in a perfect color. Recently you announced the launch of the global sustainability standards, which really caught my attention, and you got acknowledged by the UK IP office, and it's very focused on SME. What does it mean for SME, Rana, that the global sustainability standard? Can you bring it down? If I'm an SME, what does it mean for me?
Of course. So yeah, it was a challenge because we're a startup, obviously, and becoming any sort of certifying body, approved by any EU or UK body is always extremely challenging. But we were really, really kind of fixated on this because SMEs are super interested in sustainability. We so many discussions. There's so many reports on this. COP28 is coming up. Disclosure requirements are coming up, such as the EU CRSD, which I'm sure you're also quite, aware about at the moment. It's the year of sustainability in UAE. They want to do their best. So the problem was really, they don't know where to start, despite, they make up 94% of the global economy. Why are there minimal resources that are affordable to get them started? Either they have to pay an arm and a leg for consultancy, or they'll end up having to go through some really difficult technical journey to start getting, their product certified. So we wanted to create a certification mark with just one major component. All of the, all of it kind of leads to one road, which is how much are you collaborating? That's actually what we want to focus on. So we assess them based on their synergies in terms of exchanging these resources in all of the categories on one thing. How deep is your collaboration, and what are you actually doing to go outside your value chain? So we hope by creating kind of an affordable and accessible means to get certified by us, they could basically start understanding how to gather the necessary information that moves past that passive exercise of carbon accounting, for example, and it gives them an incentive to dynamically engage with their stakeholders with a financial impact. So they keep getting that incentive. Once they get certified, then they basically can use, their progress as tangible evidence to move up the ladder to these globally renowned accreditations, such as your ISOs and CRSD disclosures, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, you said the, two words, SMEs overwhelmed. Nadia, I want to stay with the SMEs a little bit, and we know that, many of the suppliers are SMEs, and many of them are overwhelmed with requirements about ESG. How does Zurich support SMEs with their supply chain, and, how do you support them on the journey?
Yeah, very good point. And Rana, I absolutely agree with you. For SMEs, this is a huge challenge. They don't have the capacity and the resources to, figure all of this out. They can't hire a chief sustainability officer in many cases. So for us at Zurich, we really see this as an opportunity to support our suppliers, because also for us to achieve net zero, we need our entire supply chain to be aligned to that, right? So we issued the supplier code of conduct in 2021. And we make educational videos and training videos available to our suppliers, and also assessment tools, self-assessment tools in which they can assess where they stand, as well as carbon emission tools, calculators that they can use for free and figure out where they are on their emission journey. For us, obviously, SMEs form the majority of our suppliers. So I think for us, helping them along is something that we take very seriously. And I believe that most organizations that have set net zero targets will also help and support their suppliers, because they're part of this entire equation. I mean, this is something we can't do alone, right? And we can't expect an SME to hire an expensive consultant and to support them. So this is something we take very seriously.
I really like that. Maybe there is a synergy between, Zurich and Surplus, how you could empower then your SME suppliers with a Surplus advisor and technology to help them to, manage their cycle a little bit better once you train them. You spoke about partnerships, Nadia, right? In the beginning, I think.
That's what I said earlier. We're all connected, and there are always opportunities. And I think that's also something we need to talk about. There are always opportunities for collaboration with other stakeholders in the market, with cross industry and so on. And I believe within sustainability, that's something that we all should look for.
Yesterday we had a quite interesting discussion with the CEO of Duconomy and CEO of Dreams, right, around how you can utilize even from a banking perspective, right? Usually you look at the financial data, right? But I mean, my personal hope is that we will be able to assess customers as well on their sustainable behavior, right? And not only on the S and on the E and so on, right? I want to stay with you, Nadia, a little bit, because the insurance sector is famous, and also is far beyond the banking industry already in especially South Africa and some other countries, right? Where you already today use a lot of predictability model on the S part, which is from healthcare perspective. Can you share a little bit with the audience what are some of the progressive strategies you have on the insurance part, where you maybe within the environment and especially on the S, which is the health and so on, which you utilize in your models? Yeah,
so I think as the insurance sector, we're very data rich, right? Specifically also when it comes to natural catastrophes. We have a lot of data that we've gathered over the years that helps us, look at certain patterns and so on. So when it comes to environmental impacts, there's a lot of data available, and we use that to help build resilience in communities, support them, especially around flood, for example, flood risk and so on, but also health-related data. Obviously, we've gathered a lot over the years. And as an insurance company, there are really two main areas that we focus on. One is risk and resilience, and the second one is our investment portfolio. Insurance companies have a big investment portfolio, and we're looking at decarbonizing that as well. So these are major areas that we're concerned.
Yeah, I'm imagining, maybe next year or maybe sooner or later, through my glucose monitor, you will know exactly what I'm doing. And then you will tell me, Andrea, in the last 5 days, you ate too much, didn't exercise. So your insurance premium will go up by, $5, right? If you don't, so I think that the power of data, because ESG is not only about environment, right? There are multiple different facets to it. And it's on the S part, it's very, data is incredible. I want to stay with, yes, Nadia, you want to add
Let me
anything?
just add something on the data side. Yes, potentially that is a future. And I know there has been a lot of discussion around AI and the fears around that. I think we still need to be mindful around data privacy. So
good point.
I don't think companies can just freely track you without your consent.
My permission.
Exactly. So I think that will only be possible if you give permission to do so. I mean, I don't believe
I
that
agree with you.
then,
And that's where the beauty of Web3 comes in, right? And you spoke about some of the products which obviously Zurich is doing. So if we stay on the products, Rana, many companies still look at the sustainability from pure recycling, right? It's to say I get something, I put it somewhere, right? I have the right bin where to put it. If I can, take the analogy, which doesn't really address the problem, right? Because the problem is really not only created in the beginning, in the middle, but also how you dispose of it, right? And I want to call it, what is one's company trash is the other company treasure, right? And this is really fascinating space. So what is, you mentioned a couple of numbers, but what is the real opportunity? Maybe we can, use UAE as an example, but even global. Can you tell us, if we really focus on it, what change can we expect in that space?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I really liked how, some of these subject matters about data was coming up, because it's really relevant. The question is, I see all these numbers come out all the time, $4 trillion circular economy opportunity and so on and so forth. And whereas in reality, we don't actually know the real figure and what impact this is having at the moment, because there are so many, there's so many blind spots in both materials and the way that the circular economy is operating. I'm a huge proponent of this, and I say this with a pinch of salt, but circular economy generally has been used as a term to make people feel good about themselves and they're doing something about it. And back to your point about recycling, oftentimes it's, I'm going to throw it in the bin and hope that it goes to somewhere other than the landfill. That's wish cycling, because the infrastructure simply doesn't exist in many contexts. Right? And so when we imagine the circular economy, we think of it as a circle, but it's not true. Many of our points of intervention, even at the leakages, if we actually consider the amount of energy it takes to upcycle or downcycle a product as simple as a chair, is not considered a lot of the time. That's called entropic overhead. How much energy does it actually take for me to take this chair and then turn it into something of higher value? So I think for our approach to generally be quite realistic and to understand the opportunity at hand, we should think of it as a sort of linear mode of circularity from the very beginning, as you said, from like the ideation, the inception of what the product is, to the very end. And depending on the business operation, at what point does it make sense to them for them to actually intervene? Is it during the manufacturing? Is it during the distribution? And so on. So like if they're an importer of furniture and have no control over the design, we can't really expect the same, type of output as a person who may have, a company that may have full control over the design. So perhaps extended producer responsibility would make sense for them. If they're a raw material supplier, they can perhaps influence their customers to opt for secondary, locally available materials and so on. So despite having a lot of these different roles to play at different points of intervention, I like to say that kind of no matter what, materials only really lose value once we stop finding uses for them. So I think the market opportunity for this is much larger than we imagine.
Yeah, I think so. If somebody listens to it who has a company, for example, right, and say, wow, I never thought about it from that perspective, right? And I really want to put the real life cycle assessment, right? Which is, as you said, until you can't use it anymore. How should the company approach it the right way? What would be maybe the 1-2 things to just start with? Because to start is the first step of improvement, right? What would it be, Rana?
I think, honestly, to keep this one very simple, a lot of the kind of analytical systems start at the very inception, such as LCA and so on. But as we're going on, we're starting to realize that it's not always 100% accurate, because they're based on benchmarks. Sometimes don't carry over into other jurisdictions or contexts, right? So we found the easiest way is to work backwards. So what do we already have? How can we add more value? What can we do with what we have at the moment? And where do we have control?
I really like it. I'm just thinking out loud. I think we should run a hackathon with some of the UAE schools and collect materials and start to have them to think about, what could you do out of it, right? My son just had a fashion show last week where they should have recycled what they have at home and create new clothes, and you would not believe what the children created just of things they found in their houses, right? So analogy like that, I really like it. Nadia, in your view, how organizations who don't necessarily deal with produce of physical goods need to consider ESG, because many obviously are in services, right? So the product is not physical. So how should they consider it, and how do they incorporate into the ESG into this non-physical product development life cycle?
Yeah, I'll answer the question in a minute. I just wanted to add something to Rana's point.
Please.
I think what we also need is more transparency in the supply chain and better labeling, because also I think many consumers would like to make better decisions, but they don't know how, because there's no appropriate labeling that actually informs them about the life cycle of a product, about where, how many uses does this product potentially have, right? So I think we need to also get to a stage where we have better labeling that can give more transparency around that. And I'm sure Rana has already thought about this, but that's just something I wanted to add. And coming back to your question, so for companies that offer services and not products or produce anything like us, like an insurance company, I think we kind of look at 3 areas, and I briefly mentioned that earlier already. One is, what type of products can we offer that incentivize or reward sustainable behavior? So sometimes it could be we offer lower insurance premiums for something, something that has better sustainable behavior that we will quantify, right? Or for example, coverage of renewable energy projects or something like that. Secondly, one of our core expertises is around managing and assessing risk. Insurance companies understand risk really well. So it's about building climate risk into underwriting processes and ensuring that that's taken into consideration. And thirdly, it's our investment strategies. We collect premiums, we have large investment portfolios. We need to make sure that those investments are in areas that are on a sustainable trajectory, or even responsible or impact investing, and that we ensure that within our investment portfolio there are not certain hard to abate sectors, oil and gas, coal, and so on, and look at that and gradually decarbonize that to get to a net zero position.
Many of organizations talk about net zero and carbon emission, right? It's really like, I feel it's almost misused words, right? Everybody's throwing it right, left, center, up, down, so, and then we spoke it in the beginning, an average employee cannot really connect to it. And I think you touched, Nadia, on one of your pillars, which is people, right? What are some of your recommendations to build this awareness, in the organization, to have their staff buy in? How do you translate this into language which they can relate to, which they actually believe, and that there's something which they personally can and emotionally can connect to?
I think it's really important to make it relatable and relevant for employees. It has to be something that they can relate to in their daily lives. If it's some big concept with big words, they will lose interest very quickly and they will not feel engaged, right? So it's about, also creating workshops and training sessions in which you bring those topics closer. I mean, one topic is recycling that Rana touched upon. Recycling is a topic that people really believe that if they put something in a recycling bin, it's going to be recycled, and that's just not the case. So educating about that, or educating about good behaviors. For example, also, the issue around food waste. What implications does it have when we create a lot of food waste, right? There are huge issues around that. Better buying decisions and so on. Do we need to buy that much? Do we really need to run to the mall because there is a sale and we have to buy a lot of things? Is it really necessary? Do I really need these things right now? Or am I just buying them because they're on offer, creating better behaviors step by step that are relatable to everybody. And nowadays, when everybody's talking about the cost of living crisis, it's the perfect time to talk about sustainability, because it can really connect these topics. When your budget is a bit tighter, there are some wise decisions you can make. And like you said, make soups out of ugly vegetables because they actually last longer. Or also learn about new techniques on how to make your produce last longer, how to store them better, right? How can you store them better so they last longer and you can get more out of them? So really making things relatable to day-to-day lives.
No, it's very interesting that you talk about storage, because I had a chat with colleagues today around lunch, how store vegetables so that they last, 7 to 10 days. And it's really about education, and at Mastercard, for example, part of our bonuses is connected to, achieving ESG goals, which obviously, cascades. It makes it, you really feel it, right, if you don't do it. And I love, Nadia, what you said about the transparency. And I was thinking, Rana, in the whole life cycle, imagine on the Gaben, you have a chip which is not only provenance and gives you a CO2, but it's connected and tells you, I've been worn 10 times, I still should be worn 15 times. And when you don't want to wear me, this is what you can do with me, right? This is where you can bring me. This is what you can do with the material. This is how you can reuse it. Almost like gamify the experience, which whatever we have, the same could be with car, a piece of couch, right? The moment the sensors will be proficiently programmed and enough data will be there, I think that this experiences could really, really go, quite high. I want to, go a little bit higher, because doing all of this, and as a business, right, I want to not only do it to feel great and because I believe in it, but I also want to attract investors, right, and better stakeholders. Rana, how does Surplus enables businesses to awake interest of investors and customers? Is it what if they operate in this? Does it not make their operation more expensive? How does it add up?
Great question, Andrea. And actually, I'll just kind of sum up in 3 brief points. The first thing is really in our obsession, running towards resource efficiency and process optimization. I feel that as a business community, we've really lost track of one fundamental truth that we should be striving for, which is resilience. And what resilience looks like is being able to operate in conditions in which we cannot control. And just furthering to kind of Nadia's point, I really do resonate with that, because banks and insurance are always about risk. And equity is all about value maximization. So we need to somehow merge these, these trains of thought almost, and interlock those overlapping priorities into business contexts that are interweaved with both climate and financial landscapes, because once you see how interconnected they are fundamentally interconnected. And in that sense, once you're actually seeking financial resilience, you can actually see the overlay with the climate impact as well. And so the last thing is also, I think really driving the major value for us is going to be this elusive demystification of scope 3 emissions, or the emissions that are linked to assets that are not controlled by the company, both up and downstream, such as transport, is becoming a hot topic. Everyone's talking about it. It's really important. We don't have transparency about it, but actually most of your risk is very much concentrated within your own supply chain, and not scope 1 and not scope 2. So investors are becoming increasingly concerned about it. Clients are becoming increasingly concerned about it, because we saw that in COVID, that, once these supply chain disruptions happen, all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, I can't buy my same brand of milk, or my cinnamon oats that I eat for breakfast every morning went off the shelves, and I was not happy about that. I'm just kidding. I think it's one of those things that are going to be very, very attractive to them. Whereas B2C facing businesses can have, seriously attractive elements by innovating with secondary materials, reducing their costs, as you said, right down. Enormous amounts of cost reduction, up to 92% for product lines, right? And committing to sustainability in a very transparent way. So once the business has that type of oversight and transparency, as you guys have mentioned, by fundamentally shortening it, the customer can have more visibility and more brand loyalty, and so on, kind of relating to your points. And that translates to a lower customer acquisition cost and higher LTV for businesses, as well as the financial savings elements as well.
Right. Nadia, what is your take on this? Because I saw you nodding. I'm sure that you have a lot to say as well.
To add to the scope 1, 2, and 3 conversation, I think it's so important that companies actually measure where are their emissions. And then we will realize that a lot of them are in scope 3. For us, it's around 80% of our emissions are within scope 3, meaning they're out of our control, out of our direct control. And we have to look at step by step, how can we work with stakeholders and collaborate so that we reduce those emissions and get as close to zero as we can. And by the way, just to clarify, net zero nobody's going to get to zero. There will be a residual that we still need to probably offset, but the objective should be to get as close to zero as you possibly can. And today, Scope 3 still requires a lot of attention because there is not enough transparency in the Scope 3. As everybody gets on board with this journey, and hence why we involve our suppliers in this as well and have those discussions, as they all come on board, Scope 3 will become more transparent and easier to measure. And like you mentioned in the beginning, I believe that we need technology to get transparency into supply chains, to be able to actually transparently track Scope 3. It won't happen through Excel sheets. This really has to be, we have to track it throughout the entire supply chain, ideally with blockchain or other technologies, to have real transparency and traceability. And also what I would like to add is companies can measure and publish their emissions, but to really be credible, you need a third party to
validate,
certify and verify that what you state is really accurate, or else we all run the risk of greenwashing. So I think that's also an important point to make.
Yesterday was an interesting point, and I would love to hear, view of both of you, is that, if you look at the carbon footprint measurements, right, for consumers especially, you can see it obviously on merchant category level, right? But ultimately, you would want to go on a basket level, and you would want to go even on a brand level. But today in the world, there are so many different providers and so many different indexes, and so, and everybody's saying mine is the best, and I'm accredited, and it's very, I want to hear a little bit, how do you see this then coming together? Maybe Nadia, I start with you, and then over to Rana.
Yeah, and I think that's what I meant earlier with labeling and proper, transparent labeling of it. Like you said, what does carbon footprint mean? What protocol did you use to calculate that? There is no common calculation or common standards today. There are so many different ones, and then it depends on which one did you use. Did you take everything into consideration? And I think partially we also need standards that are global, a global standard, and frameworks that are comparable, so that consumers can actually make informed decisions. Today, I don't think consumers can, because they don't have enough information. And as you can see, many companies get fined for making claims, statements of, this is sustainable material, where it in fact isn't. So we really need more transparency there, and better frameworks probably to express what does it really mean.
Interesting. Rana, what is your take on this? Because it's a really, it's a really spicy topic, I have to say.
Yeah, and I would probably sit on the not mild, but very spicy end. I think
I like it. Okay, go, take it away.
Parallel reaper spicy. Honestly, my personal view of this is that, whenever we talk about carbon footprinting, and it's not something that, always gets the same attention that it deserves, but I always like to look at the ideological underpinnings. Where did carbon footprinting come from, right? It was the geniuses at British Petroleum who coined this term to really not encourage conservation, but to, focus the consumer's attention on their tiny carbon footprints versus what big oil is actually doing. So yes, I'm a part of the conversation. We need to radically reduce our emissions, but we need to radically reduce our emissions outside of carbon. We are pushing Earth outside of its system to support us from when we left the Ice Age 10,000 years ago. So, what I'm really looking forward to is more comprehensive emissions analysis, and the way that we know, and with the way that we're calculating carbon today, I don't think is going to be anywhere near as advanced as where we're going to be 2 or 3 years from now, because we have a requirement to be much more comprehensive and much more wide in the way that we look at industrial emissions outside of a carbon context.
Very good. I have 2 questions in the chat. Rana, one is for you. A question for Rana. I often work with activation agencies. For years, we invest money in building out amazing booths and set up for different events. These events are no more than 2 to 3 days, and then the entire booth is torn down. The last few events, I've stressed how we can store, reuse the materials, and keep getting the same answer. It costs us less to build something new than to store it. Is it true If so, what is the step to do you feel the industry needs to take to make it more sustainable? It's a really practical example.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It would be great just to maybe perhaps have a read of that as well, just to make sure I caught everything. But to be honest, I think the first thing that comes to mind without thinking too deeply about it is the visibility. Perhaps it may seem imminently cheaper to, source new materials and build it all over again. But, maybe perhaps there's not the right visibility of the secondary materials that could help do that. Or perhaps other process industries that could enable you to reduce your own costs and collaborate with them. So that would be the first thing that comes to my mind without any deep thinking. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Nadia, what capabilities could we build to drive long-term reduction in emissions through the value chain? And then I will go to Rana as well.
That's a very big question.
I know.
You know,
we have a couple of minutes to go. So, the audience was saving themselves for the last.
I think overall, when it comes to emissions, and like Rana said, it's not just carbon, right? We need to look across all of them. It's really, we have to start setting clear and measurable targets. And by measurable, I also mean it has to be aligned to a recognized protocol and then verified by a third party. And then collaborate with everybody in our value chain, upstream and downstream, to really get to this reduction. So for example, like Rana said, look at, are there alternative materials that I can purchase, right? And I think in many cases, maybe some suppliers are so used to doing things a certain way and they don't also, and to kind of give them a little, cut them a little slack. Oftentimes they also don't have the knowledge about what's available, what are the materials available. So I think Rana actually can bridge that gap really for suppliers and support them in also offering them alternative solutions. But we really need to have conversations, and customers have to demand better solutions, right? They have to go to their suppliers and say, what can you do for me? I want something that's more sustainable. Find something, source it, right? And really start that dialogue as well and push them. And I think this can come from both sides.
Yeah, great answer. Rana, what is your view on what capabilities could we build drive long-term reduction in emissions through the value chain?
Yeah, that is a great question. And, just to keep it super short, because I know we're also running a bit on time. I love this topic, but essentially, I do feel that it's fundamentally rewiring our industrial architecture in a way that we can start localizing, that creates new jobs that are service-oriented, and more importantly, provides visibility to the invisible workers in the supply chain that are there already, such as waste pickers, right? This is they're serious contributors to the circular economy in the global South. But our entire emission reduction right now outside of energy, provides a 45% reduction of opportunity in our overall greenhouse gas emissions. So it's all in materials, the way that we make things, the way that we move things around, if we're not even taking into consideration just energy in general. And that just starts with just, packing in local eco-industrial kind of, architecture that's fit for purpose, and that allows for, any of those external shocks. So that could even mean something really good for businesses, right? It just means they have the need to provide more services now. They perhaps may decide to specialize on one thing rather than doing a bunch of things that is necessarily not suiting them. And then Nadia will give them a thumbs up because they're becoming a lot more climate and risk averse as well. So I feel that there is a pattern here.
Right. I have one more. Obviously, your previous answer sparked a lot of passions and emotions. So I have one more question, Rana, on the previous one. Rana, I love the conspiracy theory of BP and carbon footprint. We have long been hearing that our consumers' footprint causes something like 80% of carbon emissions. Because it's factors in all the emissions big corporations are doing to maintain our consumption lifestyles. My question is, are consumers really driving this? Or is it the corporation that are inspiring this consumption?
Thank you so much for that question. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is true. If you actually the etymology of the origins of carbon footprinting, they actually did create that term. So that's the actual origin of it. Now, the question is always, personally, I come from a B2B angle. I don't believe that it is up to people to, sacrifice things in terms of, I want to, have a biodegradable straw, or I'm going to, make all of these small steps in my life because I feel guilty. There's a lot of, climate anxiety right now. And I don't think that it's up to, the consumers should be blamed, because businesses are essentially driving this entire architecture in one way. Of course, we create the demand for it, but fundamentally businesses have the power to fundamentally influence and also really change the way that we, demonstrate our outputs as well. So that's not to say that we shouldn't be engaging in pro-sustainability behaviors, because the more well-informed we are, the more influence and leverage we have over our economic system and the way that it's built. But overall, I would feel that, businesses have a much larger role to play. And they should be much more responsible.
Yeah, and I think that we shouldn't downplay them at all. Yesterday, we've been also discussing how we personally could have almost like our sustainability goal, right? With, as Nadia was saying, with the help of technology, to measure everything we do, but ultimately it's the big corporations. Ladies, we have 4 minutes to go. So my last question to both of you, both companies, obviously Surplus and Zurich, are on this road of sustainability, right? What are some of the biggest learnings for you, which you encounter? And obviously there is, I'm sure, much more coming, but if you should name maybe 2 or 3, Nadia, what would it be?
I think some of the biggest learnings are, we don't have all the answers yet. We're still learning. And I think by being open and really, being open to new solutions and working together and collaborating, we can get to the answers. I also believe that changing consumer behavior is one of the hardest things to achieve, and we need massive changes at scale, and that can only be achieved when we go at big business and corporations, because they're the ones who can make drastic changes at scale. I think asking consumers to make these lifestyle changes will take a lot more. Yeah, and I think also a big learning for me in my sustainability journey is continue to listen to other industries, learn from other industries, because if we just stay within our own industry, we may not get all the answers. And there are many learnings that we can get from other industries as well. So have these cross-industry conversations where you can really learn about different approaches and different perspectives that can be beneficial.
I love that, cross-industry learnings. I was already thinking in my head, how could we, for our SME proposition, build in, some insurance for Zurich and assessment from Surplus to help them to obviously be better. Rana, your learnings on your journey.
Very much echo that from Nadia. For me, it's always been about collaboration. And, one thing that I've kind of taken away is that, especially in the startup scene and the, innovation landscape, people say, we have the solution for climate change. And this is there is no one size fits all solution. I know it's a bitter pill to swallow, but there are multiple sustainable business models that are fitting form to function, and they are relevant for their particular context. So, I think I would just perhaps be aware of that going forward, that there is never one, one bullet for the problem. And collaboration, cross-industrial collaboration, absolutely 100%. I don't have much more to add to that from Nadia, but that is where we see the most, fascinating failures come out. And for me, failures is something that is wonderful. It's to be celebrated. And it's something that, it's better to fail fast, than not to take any climate action at all. So that's the best
Amazing.
thing I can.
So, I think that just the fact that we are together on the panel, is a great demonstration of the possible collaboration. And I really like, what you said about, failure, Rana. With that, ladies, it was such an honor to host you today. The time flew so fast, and thank you for audience also for the questions. Tomorrow will be the last day of our sustainability week, and we will explore the amazing power and the role of new space economy in ESG, obviously. And we will be joined by Rick Tomlinson, who is a founding partner of Space Fund. Cesar Rujan, founding partner and CEO of Mega Optimal, and Hans van Dut, who is a founding director of Blessure. All of them either investors, inventors, or startups in the new space economy. Really excited to have them. Once again, Nadia, Rana, was a great pleasure. I hope we will meet on a panel again. And thank you for great answers and for educating our audience about many areas of sustainability. My name is Andrea Pražáková, and I was your host today. Thank you very much for joining.